My name is Clarence Wilson, 62 years old, and I've faced my share of challenges in life. After serving in the Marines and building a career as a structural engineer, I thought I knew what it meant to weather a storm. But nothing prepared me for that text from my lawyer, Mark, while I was getting ready for dinner at my daughter Jessica's house. When I called him back, his words shattered my entire reality in an instant. Jessica, the child I'd raised alone since she was 12, wasn't biologically mine. While I share how this revelation shook my world, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had your life turned upside down by an unexpected truth. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota where everyone knew everyone else's business. My father worked at the lumber mill, and my mother taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. It was a simple upbringing, but they instilled in me strong values about honesty, hard work, and responsibility. After high school, I joined the Marine Corps, serving 4 years, including a tour in Southeast Asia. Those years shaped me, teaching me discipline and showing me a world beyond my small town. When I returned home, I used my GI Bill benefits to attend the University of Minnesota, studying civil engineering. The transition from military to civilian life wasn't easy, but I found purpose in learning how to build structures that would last generations. During my junior year, I met Linda Thompson in the university library. She was studying nursing, her textbooks spread across the table as she frantically prepared for an exam. I offered to help her study, though I knew nothing about medicine. She laughed at my attempt, but accepted my invitation for coffee afterward. Linda was everything I wasn't: outgoing and spontaneous, with a quick laugh and a gentle way with people that made her perfect for nursing. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony. When we were both 24, we bought a modest starter home in the suburbs and settled into our careers at a local engineering firm specializing in commercial buildings, and Linda at the regional hospital. We wanted children right away, but it took us 2 years of trying before Linda finally announced she was pregnant. I still remember that moment, standing in our kitchen, Linda holding the positive test with tears in her eyes. I picked her up and spun her around, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. Those 9 months were filled with preparations, painting the nursery yellow, attending childbirth classes, and reading every parenting book we could find. Jessica's birth was complicated. Linda went into labor 3 weeks early, and there were complications. She lost a lot of blood, and for a few terrifying hours, I wasn't sure if I would lose both of them. The doctors managed to stabilize Linda, and when they finally placed Jessica in my arms, I made a silent promise to always protect this tiny human being. The first years of Jessica's life were relatively normal. Linda was an attentive mother, and I tried to be equally involved, changing diapers, giving baths, and walking the floor at night with a colicky baby. As Jessica grew, she showed Linda's compassion and my stubbornness. She was bright, learning to read before kindergarten, always curious about how things worked. I would come home from work to find Linda and Jessica conducting experiments in the kitchen, mixing baking soda and vinegar to watch it foam, or making homemade Play-Doh. Our lives changed dramatically when Jessica was 12. Linda had been feeling tired for months, brushing it off as the demands of working full-time while raising a child. When she finally went to the doctor, the diagnosis was devastating stage 4 breast cancer that had already spread to her liver. The prognosis was grim from the start, but Linda fought hard, enduring rounds of chemotherapy and radiation that ravaged her body but couldn't save her life. She died just 7 months after her diagnosis, leaving me to raise our daughter alone. Those first months as a single parent were the hardest of my life. I was grieving the loss of my wife while trying to help Jessica navigate her own grief. There were nights I would hear her crying in her room, and I'd sit outside her door, unsure what to say to make things better. I took family leave from work, focusing on establishing new routines and making sure Jessica felt secure despite her world being turned upside down. As Jessica entered her teenage years, new challenges emerged. I had no idea how to talk to her about puberty or dating topics Linda would have handled. I bought books, fumbled through awkward conversations, and did my best to support her through the tumultuous teenage years. There were arguments about curfews, concerns about her falling in with the wrong crowd, and moments when I felt completely out of my depth. But there were beautiful moments too, like when she made honor roll every semester, or when she confided in me about her dreams of becoming a doctor. Jessica was remarkably resilient. She excelled in school, particularly in science classes, and volunteered at the hospital where Linda had worked. By her senior year of high school, she had been accepted to several prestigious universities with pre-med programs. I was bursting with pride at her graduation, knowing Linda would have been equally proud of the young woman our daughter had become. College and medical school followed, with Jessica working part-time jobs to supplement the college fund Linda and I had started when she was born. I stretched my budget to help with tuition, taking on extra consulting work, and postponing my own retirement. The sacrifice was worth it when Jessica graduated from medical school, specializing in pediatrics, her passion for helping children evident in everything she did. Now, at 36, Jessica has a successful practice at a children's hospital. She married Michael, an anesthesiologist she met during her residency, and they have 2 children, Emma and Noah, who are the lights of my life. Our weekly family dinners have become a cherished tradition, a time for me to watch my family grow and thrive. I retired 2 years ago, after 35 years with the same engineering firm. My days are filled with woodworking projects in my garage, volunteering at the local Veterans Center, and spoiling my grandchildren. I still live in the house where Jessica grew up, though recently I've been considering selling it to move closer to her family. My health has been generally good, though. Recent cardiac tests revealed some concerns that need monitoring. I haven't shared the full extent of these issues with Jessica, not wanting to worry her. Instead, I've been quietly updating my affairs meeting with my longtime friend and attorney, Mark Stevens. Mark and I go back to our college days, when we shared an apartment off campus. While I pursued engineering, he went to law school eventually, establishing a successful practice handling everything from real estate transactions to estate planning. He's been my attorney for over 30 years, helping with my home purchase, setting up Jessica's college fund, and most recently, updating my will to include provisions for my grandchildren. Mark knows everything about my family and finances. He was there through Linda's illness and death, helping navigate the legal aspects, while I focused on emotional ones. So when his urgent text arrived as I was preparing to leave for Jessica's, I knew it had to be serious. Mark isn't one for dramatics or unnecessary urgency. Something was very wrong, and it involved my daughter. I had just put on my jacket and was checking to make sure I had the small gift I'd bought for Emma's upcoming birthday when my phone buzzed with a text message. Glancing at the screen, I saw Mark's name and the preview of his message. "Clarence, call me immediately. Urgent matter regarding Jessica." My heart jumped into my throat. My first thought was that something had happened to Jessica or her family, that perhaps Mark had heard news I hadn't yet received. My second thought was that there might be some legal issue with Jessica's medical practice, maybe a malpractice claim he'd gotten wind of through his professional network. My third, and what seemed most likely, was that this had something to do with the estate planning we'd recently discussed. I had decided to transfer ownership of my cabin in northern Minnesota to Jessica while I was still alive, rather than having her inherit it. Perhaps there was some issue with the paperwork or tax implications Mark had discovered. Standing in my living room, I dialed Mark's number, sinking into my recliner as I waited for him to answer. Something in my gut told me to sit down for whatever was coming. "Clarence, thanks for calling back so quickly," Mark said, when he picked up his voice carrying a weight I'd rarely heard. "What's going on?" "Mark, is Jessica okay?" "The kids. Everyone's fine health-wise," he assured me. "But I need to discuss something sensitive with you. Are you alone? Are you sitting down?" The formality in his tone made my mouth go dry. "Yes to both. What is it you're scaring me?" I heard him take a deep breath before continuing. "You remember the DNA testing we arranged as part of your estate planning to establish clear lineage for the trust funds for the grandchildren?" "Of course," I replied. It had been Mark's suggestion, part of a comprehensive approach to ensure no issues would arise after my death. Jessica, Michael, and both children had provided samples, as had I. It seemed excessive at the time, but Mark had insisted it was becoming standard practice to prevent future disputes. "The testing company we use partners with a highly regarded medical laboratory," Mark continued. "They found something unexpected in the results." "What do you mean unexpected? Is there a health concern?" Another pause, longer this time. "No, not a health concern. Clarence, according to the DNA analysis, you and Jessica do not share genetic markers consistent with a biological father-daughter relationship. In fact, the test indicates no biological relationship at all." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually checked to see if someone had struck me in the chest. "That's impossible," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "There must be a mistake." "I had the same reaction," Mark said, "which is why I requested a second analysis with a different sample. I received those results this morning. They confirmed the initial finding. There is a 0% chance that Jessica is your biological daughter." I stood up, then sat back down as my legs threatened to give way. This couldn't be right. Jessica had my mother's eyes, everyone said so. She had my stubbornness, my analytical mind. She even had the same habit of chewing her lower lip when concentrating, just like I did. "The lab must have mixed up the samples," I insisted, "or contaminated them somehow." "I considered that," Mark replied. "But the chain of custody was maintained throughout. Both tests used separate collection kits, different technicians, different testing methodologies. The results are conclusive, Clarence. I'm sorry." My mind raced through possibilities. Could Linda have... I couldn't finish the sentence. The implication that my wife might have been unfaithful was too painful to voice. "I don't know," Mark said gently. "Or there could have been some mix-up at the hospital when Jessica was born. These things have happened before." I thought back to Jessica's birth, the chaos of that night, the complications with Linda. Was it possible that in the confusion we had somehow brought home someone else's child? It seemed unthinkable, yet here was scientific evidence suggesting exactly that. "No one else knows about this yet," Mark continued. "Not Jessica, not anyone. I wanted to speak with you first, given the sensitivity." "Don't tell anyone," I said immediately. "Not until I figure out what's going on." "Of course," he assured me. "Client confidentiality applies. But Clarence, you should know that once you start investigating this, it might be difficult to keep it contained." I glanced at my watch. I was already going to be late for dinner at Jessica's. "I need to go. I'm supposed to be at Jessica's house right now." "Are you sure that's wise? Perhaps you should take some time to process this." "What am I supposed to do? Mark, cancel at the last minute? Make up some excuse?" "No, I'll go. I need to see her. Maybe looking at her will help me make sense of this somehow." "Call me tomorrow," Mark said. "We'll figure out next steps. And Clarence, try not to say anything to Jessica yet. Not until we have more information." I hung up, my mind spinning. For 36 years, I had been Jessica's father in every way that mattered. I had taught her to ride a bike, helped her with homework, walked her down the aisle at her wedding. How could she not be my daughter? As I drove to Jessica's house, I replayed memories of Linda during her pregnancy. Had there been any signs of infidelity? None that I could recall. Our marriage had its challenges like any relationship, but I had never doubted her faithfulness. Then again, would I have noticed I traveled occasionally for work? There could have been opportunities, but no, that didn't feel right. Linda had been excited about the pregnancy, had shared every moment, every kick, every hiccup with me. She had gazed at Jessica with such love after she was born. If the child wasn't mine, wouldn't there have been guilt in her eyes? The other possibility, a switch at the hospital, seemed equally implausible. Wouldn't we have noticed if we'd brought home the wrong baby? But then again, neither of us had other children to compare to, and Jessica had been our first and only child. By the time I pulled into Jessica's driveway, I had no answers, only questions, and a growing sense of dread about what this might mean for our family. I sat in the car for a few extra moments, gathering my courage. Whatever the truth was, one thing remained certain. I loved Jessica, as my daughter DNA be damned. Jessica's house was lit up warmly against the darkening evening sky, a beautiful two-story colonial in a quiet suburb. The front yard was neatly maintained with Emma's bicycle propped against the porch and Noah's soccer ball visible near the front steps. This was a happy home, filled with love and stability, everything I had worked to provide for Jessica when she was growing up. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door, trying to compose myself. I needed to act normal, to not let the bombshell Mark had dropped affect this evening with my family. Before I could ring the doorbell, the door swung open, and Jessica stood there with a smile that quickly turned to concern. "Dad, you're late. I was getting worried," she said. Then took a closer look at me. "Are you okay?" "You look awful." I forced a smile. "Just tired. Those cardiac tests yesterday took more out of me than I expected." Jessica immediately switched to doctor mode, ushering me inside and examining me with a professional eye. "You're pale. Did they give you any results yet?" "Did something show up on the tests?" "Nothing definitive. I lied, hating the deception but unable to share the real reason for my distress. Just waiting on some numbers. Don't worry about it." She didn't seem convinced, but was interrupted by Emma and Noah rushing in from the living room shouting, "Grandpa!" in unison before tackling me with hugs. These moments usually filled me with joy, but now I found myself studying their features, looking for traces of myself. Emma had Jessica's dark hair and thoughtful expression, while Noah had her smile. But if Jessica wasn't biologically mine, then these traits had come from somewhere else, from someone else's genes. Michael appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Clarence, good to see you. Dinner's almost ready. Can I get you a drink? You look like you could use one." "A scotch would be great." "Thanks," I replied, uncharacteristically accepting alcohol before dinner. As we moved to the dining room, I found myself watching Jessica more intently than usual, searching her face and mannerisms for clues for confirmation or denial of what Mark had told me. Had I been seeing resemblances all these years that weren't really there? Jessica had Linda's delicate nose and high cheekbones that I knew for certain, but the eyes I had always thought came from my mother. The analytical mind I had attributed to my influence, were those just coincidences, or the result of nurture rather than nature? "Dad, you're staring," Jessica said, setting a bowl of mashed potatoes on the table. "Are you sure you're okay?" "Sorry, just proud of you. This beautiful home, these amazing kids. Sometimes it hits me all at once." Jessica softened, touching my shoulder as she passed. "Thanks for everything you did to make it possible, Dad. I wouldn't be where I am without you." The word stabbed at my heart. If she knew the truth, would she still feel the same? Would she still see me as her father? Throughout dinner, I tried to participate in the conversation, asking the children about school and activities discussing Michael's work at the hospital, and responding to Jessica's questions about my retirement projects. But my mind kept drifting back to the DNA results, to the implications and questions they raised. I found myself recalling the night Jessica was born. It had been chaotic, yes, but not so chaotic that babies could be switched without notice. Linda had been in labor for nearly 20 hours. There had been concerns about Jessica's heart rate leading to an emergency C-section. I remembered the exhaustion and fear the relief when the doctor finally announced that both mother and baby were stable. But I also remembered holding Jessica for the first time, counting her tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the perfection of her small face. Had there been signs over the years, Linda had occasionally commented that Jessica didn't look much like me, but many parents say such things. Friends had sometimes joked that Jessica was too pretty to be my daughter, but that had seemed like harmless teasing at the time. Now, every comment, every observation took on new significance in my memory. "Grandpa want to see my science project?" Emma asked, pulling me from my thoughts. "It's about electricity and magnets." I smiled at my 8-year-old granddaughter, her enthusiasm for science reminiscent of Jessica at that age. "I'd love to see it, sweetheart." As Emma led me to the living room where her project was set up, I realized I was spending more time with the children than usual, asking more questions, studying them more intently. It was as if I were trying to memorize every detail, afraid that once the truth came out, these moments might somehow be taken from me. Jessica followed us, watching with a puzzled expression. "Dad, you've been asking a lot of questions about when I was little tonight. Is something going on?" I tried to deflect. "Just feeling nostalgic, I guess. Getting older makes you think about the past." "Is this about your heart tests? Are they worse than you're telling me?" Her voice carried the concern of both a daughter and a physician. "No, nothing like that," I assured her. "Really, everything's fine." She didn't believe me, I could tell. Jessica had always been perceptive, able to sense when something was bothering me, even when I tried to hide it. It was one of the many qualities that made her an excellent doctor, this ability to read people in situations. "Whatever it is, you can tell me," she said softly. "You know that, right?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The guilt of withholding such significant information was overwhelming, but how could I tell her? How could I upend her sense of identity, her understanding of her place in the world, without having more answers myself? As the evening progressed, I found myself studying the family photos displayed throughout the house. There was Jessica's high school graduation, her medical school commencement, her wedding day. With me walking her down the aisle. In each image, we looked like father and daughter, connected not just by legal documentation, but by the shared experiences those photos represented. Yet according to science, we were genetic strangers. After dessert, while Jessica was putting Noah to bed, Michael asked if I'd join him on the back deck. The evening had cooled pleasantly, and he handed me another scotch as we settled into the outdoor furniture. "Clarence, I've known you long enough to know when something's wrong," he said directly. "Jessica's worried, and frankly, so am I. If there's something going on with your health that you're not telling us, we need to know." I took a long sip of my drink, considering how to respond. Michael was a good man, straightforward and honest. He'd been part of our family for over a decade now, and I respected him not just as Jessica's husband, but as a person. "It's not my health, Michael. At least not directly." "Then what is it?" "You've been distracted all evening looking at Jessica like you're trying to memorize her face." I sighed, staring out into the darkened yard. "I received some unexpected news today. I'm still processing it." "Anything we can help with?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I need to verify some information first." Michael studied me for a moment before speaking again. "As a doctor, I might be able to help interpret those test results if you're confused about something. Medical jargon can be intimidating. I appreciate that, but it's not necessary right now. Jessica mentioned you had an echocardiogram and some blood work. If there's something concerning in those results, I'd rather know now so we can support you properly." His persistence was born of genuine concern, I knew. But it only deepened my discomfort. I was lying to people I loved, people who deserved the truth. Yet I couldn't bring myself to share what I'd learned until I understood it better myself. "Michael, I promise you when the time is right, I'll share everything. But right now, I just need some space to work through this." He nodded reluctantly. "All right. But remember, you're not alone in this. Whatever it is, we're here for you." As I drove home later that night, his words echoed in my mind. Not alone. But in some ways, I was very much alone with this knowledge. Until I had more information, until I could make sense of how this could have happened, the burden was mine alone to carry. The morning after my dinner at Jessica's, I found myself in the basement of my home, surrounded by dust-covered boxes of family memorabilia. I hadn't been down here in years, not since I'd packed away the last of Linda's belongings after her death. Now I was searching for anything that might offer clues to the mystery of Jessica's parentage. I started with the documents box, which contained our marriage certificate, Jessica's birth certificate, medical records, and various other official papers. Jessica's birth certificate listed me as her father and Linda as her mother, with both our signatures attesting to this fact. There was nothing unusual or suspicious about it. Nothing to indicate it wasn't genuine. Next, I turned to photo albums, flipping through images of Linda's pregnancy, Jessica as a newborn, and our early years as a family. I studied each photo intently, looking for signs I might have missed before. In one image taken at the hospital just after Jessica's birth, Linda held our daughter looking exhausted, but happy. Was there something in her expression that I should have recognized? Some hint of a secret she was keeping? As I continued digging, I found Linda's journals. She had kept them sporadically throughout our marriage, writing more consistently during her pregnancy, and Jessica's early years, then again, during her illness. I had read some entries after she died, but the pain had been too raw to go through them all. Now I pored over each page looking for anything that might shed light on the current situation. Most entries were mundane accounts of daily life, interspersed with reflections on motherhood, career challenges, and occasionally our relationship. There was nothing to suggest infidelity or knowledge that Jessica wasn't my biological child. But as I neared the journal from the year after Jessica's birth, I noticed something odd. Several pages had been torn out, leaving ragged edges in the binding. This discovery sent a chill through me. Why would Linda remove pages from her journal? What had she written that she didn't want anyone to see? The missing pages began right after an entry describing Jessica's 2-month checkup, where Linda noted that the pediatrician had mentioned Jessica's blood type didn't match what would be expected based on our blood types. The entry ended with, "Need to ask Dr. Palmer about this," and then the next several pages were gone. As I set the journal aside, my gaze fell on a small metal box pushed to the back of a shelf. I recognized it as an old safe box that had belonged to Linda, one I had never opened after her death. I had assumed it contained jewelry or personal mementos, and in my grief, I hadn't had the heart to go through it. Now I pulled it down, realizing I didn't have the key. Remembering the journal's reference to Jessica's blood type, I decided my next stop would be the hospital where she was born. Much of it had been renovated or rebuilt over the decades, but the records department might still have information from that time. At the hospital, I was met with initial resistance when I requested Jessica's birth records. Privacy laws had tightened considerably since the 1980s, and despite being listed as her father, there were limitations on what they could release without her consent. After explaining that I needed the information for potential medical concerns, a sympathetic administrator helped me locate what limited records they still had from that time. The records confirmed what I already knew about Jessica's difficult birth, the emergency C-section, and Linda's significant blood loss. There was nothing explicitly suggesting a baby switch or any other irregularity. However, the administrator mentioned that there had been a small fire in the hospital that night, causing some temporary evacuations and confusion. A fire? I asked, this detail completely new to me. I don't remember that. It was contained quickly, she explained. Checking the incident report. Electrical issue in a storage room, but it did cause some disruption in the maternity ward, which was on the same floor. This new information sent my mind racing. Could the chaos of a fire and evacuation have created circumstances where babies might be confused? It seemed far-fetched, but not impossible. As I was leaving, the administrator mentioned that Nancy Reyes, a nurse who had worked in the maternity ward back then, still volunteered at the hospital gift shop. If anyone might remember details from that night, it would be her. I found Nancy in the gift shop, arranging flower bouquets. She was in her 70s now, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. When I explained that I was looking for information about the night my daughter was born, mentioning the date and the fire, her eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh my, that was quite a night," she said, inviting me to sit with her in the small break room. We had 3 difficult deliveries happening simultaneously, and then the fire alarm went off. Not a full-blown evacuation, but we did have to move some patients temporarily. It was all hands on deck. Do you remember anything about mix-ups with the babies? Any confusion about which infant belonged to which mother? Nancy looked at me curiously. That's an odd question after all these years. Why are you asking? I hesitated, then decided a version of the truth was necessary. Recent medical tests have suggested that my daughter might not be biologically related to me. I'm trying to understand how that could be possible. Her expression softened with compassion. I'm sorry to hear that. While I don't recall any specific mix-ups, I will say that night was unusually chaotic. We had a temporary nursery set up in a different wing while the smoke was cleared from our regular area. Protocols were followed, but with the staff stretched thin and the unusual circumstances. She shook her head. I suppose mistakes could have happened. Would there be records of other babies born that night, other families I could potentially contact? Hospital records would be your best bet. Though privacy laws limit what they can share, I do remember there was a very sad case that night, a baby girl who didn't make it. The Morales family, I believe. They were devastated. This information hit me hard. If there had been a baby who died that night, and if babies had somehow been switched, could it be that my biological child had been the one who didn't survive? The thought was almost too painful to contemplate. Nancy seemed to read my expression. Howard was the attending physician for most of the deliveries that night, including yours, I believe. He's retired now, but still lives in the area. He might remember more details. Armed with this new information, I sought out Dr. Howard. At 82, he was still sharp, living in a retirement community across town. When I called and explained why I wanted to meet him, he invited me to his home that afternoon. "Clarence Wilson," he greeted me, shaking my hand firmly despite his age. "I deliver thousands of babies over 40 years of practice, but I do remember your wife's case. Complicated delivery, significant hemorrhaging. But we pulled them both through." He gestured for me to sit in his living room. "Dr. Howard, I've recently learned through DNA testing that Jessica is not biologically related to me. I'm trying to understand how this could have happened. The doctor's bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise. Not related? That's extraordinary. And he removed his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully. There were 3 deliveries that night, all challenging in different ways. Your wife's emergency C-section, a prolonged labor for a Mrs. Peterson, and a premature delivery for a young couple named Morales. The Morales baby didn't survive, I understand. He nodded gravely. Respiratory failure several days after birth. Not uncommon with severe prematurity in those days, before some of our current interventions were available. And the Peterson baby. What happened there? Healthy delivery eventually. Though I believe the mother experienced complications. Postpartum hemorrhage, if I recall correctly. He paused, frowning. You know, there was something unusual. The father, Robert Peterson, disappeared shortly after the birth, left the mother's bedside, and never returned. Staff thought he went for coffee and got cold feet about fatherhood. The mother died from complications a few days later, and with the father gone, the baby became a ward of the state. Very sad situation. My heart raced at this information. A baby without parents born the same night as Jessica. Could this child have been switched with my biological daughter? And if so, was Jessica actually the Peterson baby? Given what you've told me and the unusual circumstances of that night, including the fire and temporary relocation of infants, I cannot rule out the possibility of some mix-up, Dr. Howard said carefully, though I would have expected something to have come to light before now. Unless someone knew and kept it secret, I said, thinking of Linda's torn journal pages and locked box. After leaving Dr. Howard, I contacted my insurance company requesting records of any claims from around the time of Jessica's birth. To my surprise, they found something significant. Approximately 1 year after Jessica was born, Linda had filed a complaint against the hospital, which had been settled for a substantial sum. I had never known about this claim or the resulting settlement. This discovery sent me to the bank where Linda and I had held our joint accounts. With proof of my status as her widower and executor, I was able to search for any individual accounts she might have held. And there it was, a savings account opened in her name alone, with an initial deposit matching the settlement amount from the hospital. The account had barely been touched over the years, with the interest accumulating. There was also a safe deposit box associated with the account. With the necessary paperwork and identification, I was granted access to the box, my hands trembling, as the bank manager left me alone with it in the viewing room. Inside, I found what I had been searching for, a complete set of journals, including the pages missing from the one in my basement. There was a sealed envelope addressed to me, several documents from the hospital, and a small key that I immediately recognized as fitting the lock on the metal box at home. I read the missing journal pages first, my heart pounding. Linda had documented her growing suspicion that Jessica wasn't our biological child, triggered by the blood type discrepancy noted by the pediatrician. She had secretly had additional testing done, which confirmed her suspicions. The entries detailed her agonizing decision not to tell me her fear that if I knew the truth, I might want to find our biological child, or worse, might love Jessica differently. The hospital documents included correspondence about the complaint Linda had filed and the subsequent settlement. The hospital had acknowledged a potential identification error during the evacuation caused by the fire, though they admitted no explicit wrongdoing. The settlement agreement included a confidentiality clause, explaining why Linda had never told me about it. Finally, with shaking hands, I opened the envelope addressed to me. Inside was a letter dated 6 months before Linda died, when she had first been diagnosed with terminal cancer. My dearest Clarence, it began. If you are reading this, I am gone, and you have somehow discovered the truth I've kept from you for too long. I hope you can forgive me for the deception, though I will understand if you cannot. The night Jessica was born, in the chaos of the emergency C-section, the fire, and my own medical crisis, a mistake was made. Jessica is not biologically our daughter. I discovered this when she was about a year old through blood type testing that shouldn't have been possible given our genetic makeup. I confronted the hospital privately, and they investigated. While they never officially admitted fault, the settlement they offered confirmed my suspicions. Our biological daughter, according to what little they would tell me, had been given to another family, the Petersons. Sarah Peterson died days after giving birth, and her husband Robert had abandoned them both. Our biological child became a ward of the state and was eventually adopted. I made the hardest decision of my life then, Clarence. I chose not to tell you, not to pursue our biological child, and not to disrupt Jessica's life. I couldn't bear the thought of losing her, of watching you pull away from her, if you knew she wasn't really ours. She was ours in every way that mattered. She was the baby we brought home, the child we raised, the daughter we loved. I've carried this secret like a stone in my heart for all these years. If you found this letter, you now have a choice to make as well. Jessica is an adult now, building her own life. Does she need to know this truth? Will it hurt more than help? I leave that decision to you, with only this plea. Whatever you decide, please don't let this change how much you love her. She is still the same. Jessica is still our daughter in all the ways that truly count. If you do choose to search for our biological child, I've included what little information I have about the Petersons and the adoption that followed. I hope you find peace with whatever path you choose. I have loved you completely. Clarence, even while keeping this secret, I hope someday you can understand why I made the choice I did. Forever yours, Linda. I sat in the bank's viewing room for a long time, tears streaming down my face. Linda's letter clutched in my hand. All these years, she had carried this burden alone, protecting both Jessica and me from a truth she thought might destroy our family. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at being kept in the dark, grief for the child I'd never known, and overwhelming love for the woman who had made such an impossible choice. Back home, I used the key from the safe deposit box to open Linda's metal box. Inside were more documents, including the adoption records Linda had managed to obtain, showing that our biological daughter had been adopted by a family named Daniels and renamed Catherine. There was also a photograph of a baby in a hospital bassinet, with Baby Girl Wilson 6obs20z written on a card in the foreground. This was our biological child, the daughter I had never known. With these pieces of the puzzle in place, I now faced the most difficult decision of my life: whether to tell Jessica the truth, and whether to search for Catherine Daniels, the daughter who shared my blood, but not my memories. The weight of what I'd discovered kept me awake for several nights. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling. Linda's letter on my nightstand, replaying our life together, and wondering how she had managed to keep such a monumental secret. In some moments I felt betrayed, in others I understood her impossible choice. Mostly, I struggled with what to do next. I contacted Mark to update him on my findings and seek his legal advice. We met at his office, where I spread out the documents I'd collected, including Linda's letter and the hospital settlement papers. "This is extraordinary, Clarence," Mark said, examining each item carefully. "Linda managed this entire legal proceeding without you ever knowing. The settlement itself isn't unusual, given the circumstances, but the secrecy is remarkable." "She was protecting our family," I said, finding myself defending her decision despite my own conflicted feelings. "She was afraid of how I might react, what it might do to my relationship with Jessica. And now you need to decide whether to tell Jessica and whether to look for your biological daughter, Mark summarized. From a legal perspective, there are several considerations. He outlined the potential ramifications from inheritance rights to medical information that might be relevant to both Jessica and Catherine. While the statute of limitations had long expired for any action against the hospital, there might be records or resources available through the adoption agency to facilitate contact with Catherine, if that was what I wanted. But the biggest question isn't legal, it's ethical and emotional, Mark concluded. What's best for everyone involved? Jessica has built her identity her entire life as your daughter. How will this revelation affect her? And Catherine has grown up with her adoptive family, possibly with no knowledge of the circumstances of her birth. Is disrupting her life the right thing to do? These were the questions that had been circling in my mind endlessly. I had no easy answers. What would you do, Mark? Not as my lawyer, but as my friend. He considered this seriously. I'd want to know the truth if I were in Jessica's position, but I'd want it presented in a way that emphasized continuity rather than disruption, that made it clear nothing changes in terms of your relationship. As for Catherine, I'd probably want to know if I had a biological child out there, but I'd approach that search with extreme caution. Following Mark's advice, I consulted with a psychologist who specialized in family secrets and adoption issues. Dr. Eleanor Matthews listened to my story with compassionate attention, asking thoughtful questions about Jessica's temperament, our relationship, and my own feelings about the situation. There's no perfect way to share this kind of information, she advised. But generally, honesty delivered with sensitivity is better than secrets that can emerge in potentially more damaging ways later on. If you decide to tell Jessica, I'd recommend being prepared with all the information you have, creating a private, comfortable setting, and emphasizing continuously that your relationship with her remains unchanged. And what about Catherine? I asked. Should I try to find her? That's a separate decision, Dr. Matthews explained. You could tell Jessica about her biological origins without actively searching for Catherine, or you could search for Catherine without telling Jessica immediately. Each path has its own implications. What's most important is that you're clear about your motivations and prepared for a range of possible outcomes. I left her office with a clearer sense of my options, but the decision itself remained agonizing. That evening, I sat in my living room looking at family photographs, particularly those of Linda, wishing I could talk to her about this, hear her perspective now that the secret was out. After much reflection, I decided I needed to tell Jessica the truth. She was an adult, a medical professional, who understood genetics, and a mother who deserved to have accurate information about her biological background, if only for potential health implications for her children. More importantly, our relationship had always been built on trust and honesty. Continuing to withhold this information now that I knew, it felt like a betrayal of that foundation. I called Jessica and asked if she could come to my house alone the following Saturday. There's something important I need to discuss with you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad, you're scaring me. Is this about your health? Please just tell me. It's not about my health, at least not directly, but it is important, and I'd rather talk in person. She reluctantly agreed, though I could hear the worry in her voice. I spent the next few days preparing, organizing the documents in a logical order, rehearsing what I would say, and trying to anticipate her questions and reactions. When Saturday arrived, I arranged the living room carefully, placing tissues nearby and making sure there were comfortable seats. I prepared coffee and Jessica's favorite cookies, small touches of normalcy in what would be an anything but normal conversation. Jessica arrived mid-morning, her face tight with concern. Okay, Dad, I'm here. What's going on? That's so important, it couldn't be discussed over the phone. I led her to the living room, asked her to sit down, and took a deep breath. Before I start, I need you to know something that will never change regardless of what I'm about to tell you. I love you. You are my daughter in every way that matters, and nothing could ever change that. Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. Dad, you're really freaking me out now. I recently discovered something unexpected. I continued forcing myself to maintain eye contact, despite the fear churning in my stomach. As part of updating my will and setting up trusts for Emma and Noah, Mark suggested we do DNA testing to establish clear lineage. The results showed something none of us expected. I paused, gathering courage for the words I never thought I'd say. According to the DNA analysis, you and I are not biologically related. Jessica stared at me, her expression frozen. What? That's impossible. There must be a mistake in the test. That's exactly what I said. Mark ordered a second test with different samples. The results were the same. She shook her head in disbelief. But how are you saying Mom had an affair that's not possible? She would never. No, I don't believe she did, I said, and proceeded to explain what I had discovered about the night she was born, the fire at the hospital, the confusion in the maternity ward, and Linda's subsequent discovery and decision to keep the truth hidden. As I spoke, Jessica's expression cycled through shock, disbelief, confusion, and pain. When I showed her Linda's letter, she read it with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. All these years, she whispered. She knew all these years and never said anything. And I'm not. She couldn't finish the sentence. You're still Jessica Wilson, I said firmly. You're still the brilliant, compassionate, wonderful person you've always been. Your mother and I raised you, loved you, and are immensely proud of who you've become. The only thing that's changed is a biological fact that has no bearing on our relationship. Jessica stood up abruptly, pacing the room. But it does change things. My entire medical history, my genetic background, everything I thought I knew about my biological inheritance is wrong. What about Emma and Noah? Their medical histories are affected too. This was the doctor in her speaking, focusing on the practical implications as a way of processing the emotional shock. I know this is overwhelming, I acknowledged. And you have every right to whatever feelings come up. I'm here to answer any questions, provide any support you need. I need some air, she said suddenly. I need to think. She headed for the door. Jessica, I called after her, my voice breaking. Please know that I just found out too. I would never have kept this from you intentionally. She paused at the door, her back to me. I know, Dad. I just need some time. I'll call you later. With that, she was gone, leaving me alone with the fear that our relationship might never be the same. The next few days were agonizing. Jessica didn't call that evening as promised. When I tried calling her the next day, the conversation was brief and strained. She was still processing, she said, and needed space. Nearly a week passed before she contacted me again. She had done her own DNA test. She explained needing to verify the information for herself. The results had confirmed what I'd told her. She asked if we could meet again, this time at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop we both liked. When we sat down with our drinks, Jessica looked exhausted, but composed. I've been thinking about this constantly, she began. At first I was just in shock. Then I felt angry, not at you, but at Mom, for keeping this secret at the hospital, for their mistake at the whole situation. Then I started wondering about my biological parents, who they were if I have siblings somewhere. I have some information about that, I said, and shared what I had learned about the Peterson Sarah's death and Robert's disappearance, and how Jessica had likely become a ward of the state before being given to us. So my biological father is still alive somewhere. Robert Peterson, she asked, her voice quiet. Possibly. I haven't tried to locate him yet. I wanted to talk to you first to see what you wanted to do. Jessica was silent for a moment, stirring her coffee absently. What about your biological daughter? Have you tried to find her? No, I answered honestly. I know her adoptive name was Catherine Daniels, but I haven't taken steps to contact her. That's another decision I wanted to discuss with you first. Why? Why would my opinion matter about that? She's your actual daughter. The pain in her voice broke my heart. Jessica, look at me, I said, waiting until she met my eyes. You are my actual daughter. DNA doesn't make a parent. Midnight fevers, and homework help, and teaching you to drive, and walking you down the aisle. That's what makes a parent. Catherine Daniels may share my genetic material, but she's a stranger to me. You're my daughter in every way that counts. Tears filled her eyes. Even knowing I'm not really yours. Especially knowing that, I said firmly, because it means I chose you again and again, every day for 36 years, and I'll keep choosing you for however many years I have left. For the first time since the revelation, Jessica smiled a small but genuine expression that lifted a weight from my chest. So what do we do now? She asked. That's up to you, at least partly. If you want to try to find Robert Peterson, I'll support that. If you want me to look for Catherine, I'll consider it. If you want to leave everything as it is and just process what we know now, that's valid too. I think I do want to find out about my biological background, she said slowly. For medical reasons, if nothing else. But I'm not ready to rush into anything. And if you want to find Catherine, I think you should. She deserves to know the truth too. This conversation marked the beginning of a careful, thoughtful journey for both of us. Jessica decided she wanted to learn more about her biological parents, but wasn't ready for direct contact yet. I respected her pace, providing information as I found it without pushing her. As for Catherine, I struggled with whether to disrupt her life with this revelation. After much consideration, I decided to at least try to locate her, to have the information ready if it ever seemed right to make contact. Through the adoption agency records and with Mark's legal assistance, I was able to trace Catherine Daniels to a small town in a neighboring state. She was 36, the same age as Jessica, married with 3 children, and working as an elementary school teacher. I didn't contact her, but knowing she was out there, that she appeared to be living a good life, brought a strange comfort. My search for Robert Peterson proved more straightforward than expected. He had remarried and was living in Oregon, where he ran a small landscaping business. He had 2 other children from his second marriage, which meant Jessica had half-siblings she knew nothing about. While gathering this information, I made an unexpected connection. In visiting the cemetery where I believed my biological daughter had been buried, I encountered an elderly woman placing flowers on the grave marked Maria Morales. This was Elena Morales, the grandmother who had lost her granddaughter the same night Jessica was born. Our conversation was hesitant at first, but as I explained why I was there, a remarkable story emerged. Elena revealed that her family had also suspected a hospital mix-up. Tests had shown that baby Maria had a blood type incompatible with both parents, but the hospital had dismissed their concerns. The child had died days after birth, from what doctors called natural causes related to prematurity, but the Morales family had always harbored doubts. We wondered if our true granddaughter was out there somewhere, Elena said, her weathered hands arranging flowers on the small grave. But my son and his wife were so devastated by the loss, they couldn't bear to investigate further. They divorced a few years later, the grief too much for their marriage to withstand. I shared what I had learned, and together we pieced together a theory. There had been 3 babies involved in the mix-up that night. The Peterson baby Jessica had gone home with us. Our biological daughter had gone home with the Morales family and tragically died. And the Morales baby had likely been the one adopted by the Daniels family and renamed Catherine. This realization brought both clarity and new questions. If our theory was correct, Catherine Daniels was actually the biological daughter of the Morales family. Did she have a right to know this? Did the remaining Morales family members have a right to know their daughter was alive and well? These questions led to many discussions between Jessica and me, and eventually, with professional guidance, we made contact with both the Peterson and Morales families. The meetings were emotionally charged, but ultimately healing for everyone involved. Robert Peterson was stunned to learn he had a daughter he never knew about. His abandonment after Sarah's death had been driven by overwhelming grief and guilt, but he had always regretted not staying to see about the baby. Meeting Jessica was, in his words, like seeing Sarah again, as she had inherited many of her biological mother's features and mannerisms. The Morales family, particularly Elena, found comfort in learning that while one baby had been lost, another had survived and thrived. Jessica formed a particularly close bond with Elena, who shared stories and photos of the family. Jessica would have been born into under different circumstances. After much consideration, I decided to reach out to Catherine Daniels as well, sending a carefully worded letter explaining the situation and offering to share more information if she was interested. Weeks passed with no response, and I had begun to accept that she might not want contact when a letter arrived with an Oregon postmark. Catherine wrote that she had been shocked by my letter, but not entirely surprised. She had always felt somewhat different from her adoptive family, though they had been loving and supportive. She had known she was adopted, but had been told her birth parents were teenagers who couldn't raise her. She expressed interest in learning more particularly about her potential biological connection to the Morales family, but requested time to process the information and discuss it with her husband and adoptive parents. Over the following year, our unusual extended family began to form connections. Jessica developed relationships with her half-siblings from Robert's second marriage. I exchanged occasional letters with Catherine, slowly building a rapport before we finally agreed to meet in person. The Morales family was cautiously hopeful about the possibility of knowing Catherine, their biological daughter, who had been raised by others. 1 year after Mark's fateful phone call that started this journey, our expanded family gathered at my home for a remarkable reunion. Jessica and Michael were there with Emma and Noah. Robert Peterson had come from Oregon with his wife Susan and their 2 children, Jessica's half-siblings. Elena Morales and her surviving son Carlos represented the Morales family. And most significantly, Catherine Daniels had agreed to join us traveling with her husband David and their children. Looking around my backyard at this gathering of people connected by blood circumstance and now choice, I was struck by how differently things might have turned out. If Linda had made different decisions, if I had reacted differently to the truth, if Jessica had rejected the new reality rather than embracing it, our story could have been one of division and loss rather than expansion and connection. The past year had not been without challenges. There had been difficult conversations, tears, and moments of doubt. Jessica had gone through periods of identity confusion, wondering which traits came from nature and which from nurture. Catherine had struggled with complicated feelings toward her adoptive parents, whom she loved deeply, while forming connections with her biological family. And I had grappled with my relationship to Catherine, wanting to know her, while being careful not to overstep or create expectations neither of us could fulfill. But there had also been moments of profound joy and discovery. Jessica and Catherine, born on the same day and switched at birth, had formed a unique bond, fascinated by their similarities and differences. Emma and Noah had gained a network of extended family members who adored them. and I had found a kind of peace I hadn't thought possible when this all began, knowing that while I had missed the opportunity to raise my biological daughter, she had been loved and well cared for by her adoptive family. As we sat down to dinner at tables spread across the yard, I stood to offer a toast. A year ago, I thought I knew what family meant. I began looking around at the faces turned toward me. I thought it was defined by blood and legal documents, by shared history and DNA. What I've learned since then is that family is much more complex and much more beautiful than that simple definition. I raised my glass to Jessica first. To my daughter, not by blood, but by every other measure that matters. You have shown extraordinary courage and grace throughout this journey. Next, I acknowledged Catherine. To the daughter I never had the privilege to raise, but whom I'm honored to know now. Your openness to this unusual situation has been a gift to all of us. I continued recognizing each group, the Petersons who had given Jessica her biological heritage, the Morales family, who had lost so much but gained unexpected connections, and finally raising my glass to everyone. To all of us, a family created not just by circumstances beyond our control, but by the choices we've made to embrace the truth and each other. May we continue to choose connection over division, understanding over judgment, and love over fear. As glasses clinked and conversations resumed, Jessica came to stand beside me, slipping her arm through mine. "Pretty good speech, Dad," she said, leaning her head against my shoulder just as she had done since childhood. "I meant every word," I told her. "I know." She looked out at the gathered family members, some related by blood, others by circumstance, all now connected by choice. Mom would have been amazed by all this. I was angry at her for a long time after finding out she kept this secret. But I think I understand her better now. She was trying to protect us, the only way she knew how. She made the best decision she could with the information she had. I agreed. Just like we're all trying to do now. Jessica smiled. "I have something to tell you. Michael and I have been talking, and we've decided to name the baby Linda if it's a girl." "Baby?" I looked at her in surprise. "You're pregnant." She nodded, her eyes bright with tears and joy. "Due in February. We just found out last week. And yes, before you ask, I've already shared the news with Robert and Elena. They're thrilled, too." I hugged her tightly, overcome with emotion. Linda would have loved that. And she would have loved seeing all of this, our family expanding in ways none of us could have imagined. As the evening progressed, I found myself sitting with Elena Morales, both of us watching the younger generation interact, our grandchildren playing together as if they had known each other all their lives. "Life takes strange turns," Elena said reflectively. 36 years ago, I lost my granddaughter, and you lost your daughter. Now, here we are, surrounded by family we didn't know we had. Do you ever wonder what might have been different?" I asked. "If the babies hadn't been switched that night." She considered this, her wise eyes watching Catherine, who was laughing with Jessica across the yard. "Of course. But I've lived long enough to know that questioning the past too much robs us of the present. Your Jessica became the person she was meant to be. Our Catherine found her path. And now we have this gift of knowing each other, of expanding our hearts to include more love. That is no small thing." I nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. The truth about Jessica's origins could have torn our family apart. Instead, it had multiplied it, creating connections where none had existed before. The journey had been painful at times, forcing all of us to re-examine our assumptions about identity, parenthood, and family. But it had also been profound, revealing that love is not limited by biology, and that family can be both born and chosen. As the sun set on our gathering, casting a golden light over the yard, I looked around at this remarkable group of people, all connected by an extraordinary set of circumstances that began with a hospital fire and a momentary confusion 36 years ago. I thought of Linda, of the secret she had carried to protect what mattered most to her, and of the unexpected gift that had emerged when that secret finally came to light. Family is not defined solely by the blood in our veins or the names on our birth certificates. It is created through love, strengthened through challenges, and expanded through acceptance. In learning that Jessica was not my biological daughter, I hadn't lost a child. I had gained a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be a father. And in that understanding was a peace I hadn't known was possible. If you've been touched by our story, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What does family mean to you? Is it defined by blood, by choice, by shared history, or something else entirely? How would you have handled such a life-changing revelation? Please like and subscribe. If this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to be reminded that family bonds can transcend biology. Thank you for being part of our journey, and remember that sometimes the most painful truths can lead to the most beautiful expansions of the heart.